The lantern's amber light spilled across the hayloft as Owen Ellis climbed the ladder for his nightly check, only to freeze when he spotted the slender figure curled into the golden straw, her dark hair tangled with bits of hay and her dress torn at the hem. The woman startled awake at the sound of his boots on the wooden planks, her wide hazel eyes meeting his in a moment of pure terror before she scrambled backward against the wall, clutching a small leather satchel to her chest like a lifeline. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and desperate. "Just one more night." Owen held up his weathered hands in a gesture of peace, the lines around his eyes softening despite his initial shock. At 32 years old, he had seen enough trouble in Lovelock, Nevada to know when someone was running from something worse than the law. The woman before him could not have been more than 24 or 25, her face smudged with trail dust, and her clothes suggesting she had traveled hard and fast to end up in his barn this October evening in 1881. "Easy now," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "I am not going to hurt you, but I need to know who you are and what you are running from." The woman's chest heaved with panicked breaths, her fingers white-knuckled around the satchel. For a long moment, she studied his face in the flickering lamplight, seeming to weigh her options. Finally, her shoulders sagged in exhaustion, and she sank back against the rough wooden wall. "My name is Rose Owens," she said quietly, "and I am running from my stepfather. He killed my mother 3 weeks ago in Carson City, and he has been hunting me ever since because I saw what he did." The words hung heavy in the dusty air between them. Owen felt his jaw tighten, a familiar anger rising in his chest at the thought of any man raising a hand against a woman. He had built his ranch outside Lovelock, specifically to escape the violence and chaos that seemed to follow him during his younger years working cattle drives up from Texas. This small corner of Nevada had promised peace, but peace had a way of being disrupted when you least expected it. "Did you go to the law?" Owen asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Rose let out a bitter laugh that held no humor. "My stepfather is Henry Bartlett. He owns half of Carson City, including the sheriff. When I tried to tell them what I saw, they laughed me out of the office and told me to go home like a good girl. Henry found out I had talked, and I barely made it out of town before his men came looking for me." Owen recognized the name. Henry Bartlett had a reputation that stretched across the Nevada territory as a ruthless businessman who had made his fortune in silver mining through methods that often skirted the law. If Rose was telling the truth, and the raw fear in her eyes suggested she was, then she had every reason to be terrified. "How did you end up here?" he asked, moving slowly to set the lantern on a wooden beam so she could see his face clearly. "I have been moving from town to town, working odd jobs where I could, sleeping in barns and abandoned buildings when I could not afford a room," Rose explained, her voice trembling slightly. "I thought I had lost them after Reno, but 2 days ago I saw one of Henry's men asking questions at the general store in town. I did not know where else to go, so I found this barn and hoped the owner would not check the loft before morning." Owen studied her for a long moment, taking in the exhaustion etched into her features, the way her hands trembled even as she tried to appear strong. He knew he should turn her away, knew that getting involved in someone else's troubles was a sure way to invite disaster into his carefully ordered life. But something in her eyes, a fierce determination mixed with vulnerability, made him think of his own sister who had died 5 years earlier at the hands of her drunken husband. He had been too far away to help then, too caught up in his own life to notice the signs. He would not make that mistake again. "You can stay," he said finally, watching relief flood across her face. "But not in the hayloft. I have a spare room in the house. You will be safer there and more comfortable." Rose shook her head quickly. I cannot ask you to do that. If Henry's men come looking, I do not want you caught in the middle. The barn is fine, really. I have slept in worse places. I am sure you have, Owen replied, his tone gentle but firm. But you are on my property now, which makes you my responsibility. Besides, if anyone comes looking, they will check the barn first. The house is stone, and I have a good lock on the doors. You will have time to hide if needed. He could see her wavering, exhaustion warring with caution. Finally, she nodded slowly and tried to stand, only to wince and grab at her side. Owen was beside her in an instant, offering his arm for support. Are you hurt? He asked, concern sharpening his voice. Just bruised, Rose admitted. I had a run-in with a drunk cowboy in Fallen who thought I looked like easy prey. He learned otherwise, but not before he managed to land a few good hits. Owen felt that anger rise again, hot and fierce, but he tamped it down. Rose did not need his rage right now. She needed safety and rest. He helped her carefully down the ladder, noting how she tried to hide her limp as they crossed the yard to his ranch house. The building was modest but well built, constructed from local stone and timber with a wide porch that faced the mountains in the distance. He had built most of it himself over the past 6 years, taking pride in every beam and nail. Inside, he led her to the spare room he had prepared years ago for the sister, who never got the chance to visit. It was small but clean, with a simple bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a window that overlooked the eastern pastures where his cattle grazed. There is water in the pitcher, and I will bring you some food shortly, Owen said, stepping back toward the door to give her space. The door locks from the inside, and there is a rifle in the corner if it makes you feel safer. I will be right across the hall if you need anything. Rose stood in the middle of the room, looking around with an expression that suggested she might cry. Why are you helping me? She asked softly. You do not know me. I could be lying about everything. Owen met her gaze steadily. You could be, he agreed, but I do not think you are. I have seen enough liars in my life to recognize an honest person when I meet one. Besides, even if you were lying, which I do not believe, you are clearly in trouble and need help. That is reason enough. He left her then, closing the door quietly behind him and standing in the hallway for a moment as he processed what he had just agreed to. Owen Ellis had spent the better part of 6 years building a life of solitude and peace, avoiding entanglements and complications. Now he had a fugitive sleeping in his guest room and the possibility of dangerous men showing up on his doorstep looking for her. It should have worried him more than it did. In the kitchen, he prepared a simple meal of bread, cheese, cold beef, and apples, adding a pot of coffee to help chase away the chill of the October night. When he knocked on Rose's door and received her quiet permission to enter, he found her sitting on the edge of the bed, her shoes off, and her hair loose around her shoulders. She had washed her face and hands, revealing delicate features and a smattering of freckles across her nose that made her look younger and more vulnerable than before. "Thank you," she said as he set the tray on the small table beside the bed. "I cannot remember the last time someone showed me kindness without expecting something in return." "You do not owe me anything," Owen assured her. "Eat, rest, and we will figure out what to do in the morning." But as he turned to leave, Rose spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "He will not stop looking for me. Henry is not the kind of man who lets loose ends remain untied. I saw him push my mother down the stairs and then stand over her body, making sure she was dead before he called for help. He cannot afford to have me alive to tell that story." Owen paused in the doorway, his hand resting on the frame. "Then we will make sure he does not find you," he said with a conviction that surprised even himself. Lovelock may be small, but people here look after their own. You are under my protection now, and Henry Bartlett will have to go through me to get to you." The determination in his voice seemed to ease something in Rose's expression. She nodded slowly, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Owen Ellis." "Probably a bit of both," he admitted with a slight grin before leaving her to her meal and rest. That night, Owen lay in his own bed across the hall, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar sounds of his ranch settling around him. He should have been worried about the complications Rose's presence would bring, but instead, he found himself thinking about the courage it must have taken for her to run, to survive alone for weeks with dangerous men hunting her. She had a strength that reminded him of the wild horses he sometimes spotted in the hills, beautiful and fierce, and determined to remain free. When morning light filtered through his window, Owen rose early as always and went about his daily chores, feeding the horses and checking on the cattle that grazed in the pastures surrounding his property. He owned about 200 head, enough to provide a comfortable living without requiring a large crew. Most of the time, he managed alone with the help of an older ranch hand named Pete who came by a few times a week. Pete was due today, which meant Owen would need to explain Rose's presence carefully. He was mending a section of fence when he heard the back door of the house open and turned to see Rose standing on the porch, wrapped in a shawl she must have found in the room. She looked better after a night of rest, though the wariness had not left her eyes. She scanned the horizon as if expecting to see riders approaching at any moment. "Coffee is on the stove," Owen called out, driving the last nail into the fence post. "Help yourself to anything in the kitchen." "I will be in shortly to make breakfast." Rose nodded and disappeared back inside. By the time Owen returned to the house, she had poured 2 cups of coffee and was standing by the window, watching the road that led to town. The morning sun caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair, and he noticed she had changed into a different dress, this one less torn but still showing signs of hard travel. "I have been thinking," she said without turning around. "I should not stay. If Henry's men are already asking questions in town, it is only a matter of time before they start checking the outlying ranches. I will not put you in danger." Owen poured water into a basin and washed his hands before starting to prepare eggs and bacon. "And where would you go?" he asked reasonably. "You are exhausted, you are hurt, and winter is coming. Another few weeks of running and you will not have the strength to keep going." "I will manage," Rose said stubbornly. "I have made it this far." "You have," Owen agreed, cracking eggs into a hot skillet. "But you do not have to do it alone anymore. Look, I understand your instinct is to keep running, to not trust anyone. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand your ground and let people help you." Rose turned from the window, her expression conflicted. "Why would you risk everything for a stranger?" Owen was quiet for a moment, focusing on the food cooking in front of him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough with old pain. 5 years ago, my sister Margaret wrote me a letter asking if she could come stay with me for a while. She said she needed to get away from the city, that she wanted to see the ranch. I wrote back telling her to wait until spring because I was too busy with the cattle to host visitors. 2 months later, I got a telegram saying she was dead. Her husband had beaten her so badly she never woke up. I learned later that she had been trying to leave him for months, but no one would help her because he was a respected businessman, and she was just a woman with no proof of abuse. He plated the food and set it on the table, finally meeting Rose's eyes. "I will not make that mistake again. I will not turn away someone who needs help simply because it might be inconvenient or dangerous. Margaret deserved better, and so do you." The raw honesty in his words seemed to strip away Rose's defenses. She crossed to the table slowly and sat down, her hands wrapped around the warm coffee cup. "I am sorry about your sister," she said softly, "and I am sorry that helping me makes you relive that pain." "Do not be sorry," Owen replied, sitting down across from her. "Just let me help you. We will figure this out together." They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that suggested they had both spent enough time alone to appreciate quiet companionship. Owen found himself studying Rose when he thought she was not looking, noticing the intelligence in her eyes and the graceful way she moved despite her exhaustion and injuries. There was something about her that drew him in, a combination of vulnerability and strength that he found compelling. After breakfast, Rose insisted on helping with the dishes despite Owen's protests. They were drying the last plate when they heard the sound of a horse approaching. Rose immediately tensed, her body going rigid with fear, but Owen touched her arm gently. "It is just Pete, my ranch hand," he assured her. "I need to talk to him anyway, explain the situation. He is trustworthy, and we could use an extra set of eyes watching for trouble." Pete Morgan was a wiry man in his 60s with a grizzled beard and sharp eyes that missed very little. He had worked ranches all his life and had settled in Lovelock after his wife passed away, preferring the company of cattle and horses to the loneliness of an empty house in town. When Owen introduced him to Rose and explained her situation, leaving out some of the more dangerous details, Pete simply nodded and adjusted his hat. "Figured something was up when I saw you pacing the fence line like a nervous colt," Pete said to Owen. "Do not worry, miss. Owen here is one of the good ones, and I have dealt with plenty of trouble in my time. Anyone comes sniffing around causing problems will have to answer to both of us." Rose smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Thank you, Pete. I appreciate your discretion." "Think nothing of it," Pete replied. "Now, Owen, we should probably reinforce that north fence before the cattle decide to test it, and maybe check the water supply in the east pasture. Looked a bit low yesterday." The two men headed out to work, and Owen noticed Rose watching from the window as they rode toward the northern section of his property. He found it difficult to concentrate on his tasks, his mind constantly drifting back to the woman waiting in his house, wondering if she was safe, if she was comfortable, if Henry Bartlett's men were getting closer. Over the next several days, a routine developed. Owen and Pete would work the ranch during the day while Rose stayed close to the house, helping with cooking and mending and small tasks that needed attention. She proved to be resourceful and hardworking, never complaining about the isolation or the constant fear that shadowed her eyes. In the evenings, Owen and Rose would sit on the porch as the sun set over the mountains, talking about their lives before fate brought them together. Owen learned that Rose had grown up in San Francisco, the daughter of a shipping merchant who died when she was 16. Her mother had remarried 2 years later to Henry Bartlett, a decision driven more by financial necessity than love. Rose had tried to make the best of it, but Henry had revealed his true nature slowly, controlling every aspect of their lives with an iron fist disguised as concern. When Rose's mother had finally worked up the courage to leave him, Henry had acted swiftly and violently. "I should have done more to protect her," Rose said one evening, her voice thick with guilt. "I knew what he was capable of, but I thought if we were careful, if we planned everything perfectly, we could get away safely." "You cannot blame yourself for the actions of a violent man," Owen said firmly. "Your mother made her choice to try to escape, and you honored that by surviving and seeking justice. That takes more courage than most people have." Rose turned to look at him, the fading sunlight casting shadows across her face. "You have more faith in me than I have in myself," she admitted. Most days I feel like I am barely holding myself together, like one wrong move will cause everything to fall apart. Owen reached over and took her hand, the gesture surprising both of them. "You are stronger than you know," he said quietly. "I see it in the way you keep going even when you are terrified. I see it in the way you are trying to build a life even when you do not know if you will have tomorrow. That is real strength, Rose. Do not ever doubt it." Their hands remained clasped as darkness fell around them, and Owen felt something shift between them, a connection that went beyond simple compassion or gratitude. He had not expected to feel drawn to anyone after years of self-imposed isolation, but Rose had awakened something in him that he thought had died with his sister. It was not just attraction, though he would be lying if he said he did not find her beautiful. It was a recognition of kindred spirits, two people who had been wounded by life and were trying to find their way back to something resembling hope. The moment was broken by the sound of horses in the distance. Both of them tensed, and Owen stood quickly, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver he wore at his hip. But it was only Pete, returning from town with supplies and news. "Thought you should know," Pete said as he dismounted, his expression serious. "There were two men in the general store today asking about a young woman traveling alone. They showed a sketch around, said they were looking for a missing relative. The description matched Miss Rose pretty closely." Rose went pale, her hand gripping the porch railing. "They are here," she whispered. "I need to leave before they find this place." "You are not going anywhere," Owen said, his voice hard with determination. "Pete, did they say where they were staying?" "The hotel in town," Pete confirmed. "But they were asking about all the ranches in the area." "I would say you have maybe a day or two before they work their way out here." Owen's mind raced through possibilities. He could hide Rose somewhere on his property, but if Henry's men were thorough, they would eventually find her. He could try to smuggle her out of the area, but traveling would make them vulnerable. Or he could do something that had been forming in the back of his mind for the past few days, something that would provide Rose with protection she desperately needed. "Rose," he said, turning to face her. "I have an idea, but you are going to have to trust me." She searched his face, and whatever she saw there must have reassured her because she nodded slowly. "I trust you. Then we are getting married," Owen said simply. "Tomorrow, in town with witnesses and a legal certificate. Once you are my wife, you have legal protection. Henry Bartlett can send all the men he wants, but they cannot force a married woman to go anywhere without her husband's consent. It will buy us time to figure out a more permanent solution." Rose stared at him in shock. "You cannot be serious." "Owen, that is too much. Marriage is permanent. You cannot throw your life away just to protect me." "I am not throwing anything away," Owen replied. "Look, I know this is not a conventional proposal, and I am not asking you to really be my wife in the traditional sense. We will get married on paper, give you the protection of my name, and if you want to leave once the danger has passed, we can get an annulment. But right now, this is the best option we have." Pete cleared his throat. "He is right, Miss Rose. Out here, a woman's husband has a lot of legal standing. Even if these men figure out who you are, they cannot just take you if you are married to Owen. They would need proof of wrongdoing, and that would mean going through official channels. It would slow them down considerably." Rose looked between the two men, her mind clearly racing through the implications. Finally, she took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. "All right," she said. "If you are sure about this, then I agree. But Owen, you need to understand that Henry will not give up just because I am married. He will find another way to come after me, and I do not want you hurt because of me." "Let me worry about that," Owen said, relief flooding through him now that she had agreed. "We will face whatever comes together. That is what marriage is supposed to be about anyway, is it not?" facing life's challenges as a team. The next morning, Owen hitched up his wagon and helped Rose onto the seat beside him. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and she had pinned her hair up in a style that made her look both elegant and nervous. Pete rode alongside them on his horse, serving as both witness and guard in case they encountered any of Henry's men on the road to town. Lovelock was small, with a main street that boasted a general store, a hotel, a saloon, a blacksmith, and a modest church where Reverend Thomas Hayes presided over the spiritual needs of the community. Reverend Hayes was a kind man in his 50s who had known Owen since he first arrived in the area and had always treated him with respect and fairness. When Owen explained the situation, leaving out the most dangerous details but making it clear that Rose needed protection, Reverend Hayes studied them both carefully. "Marriage is a sacred commitment," he said seriously. "I will not perform a ceremony simply for convenience or legal protection. There must be genuine care and commitment between you." Owen looked at Rose, seeing the fear and hope mingled in her expression, and realized with startling clarity that what he was about to say was the truth. "Reverend, I may have known Rose for only a short time, but in those days I have come to care for her more than I thought possible. She is brave and strong and kind, and I would be honored to have her as my wife, regardless of the circumstances that brought us together. I cannot promise that this marriage began with love, but I can promise that I will do everything in my power to build a life with her that is based on respect, trust, and genuine affection." Rose's eyes filled with tears and she reached for Owen's hand. "I feel the same way," she said softly. "Owen has shown me more kindness and protection than anyone in my life. He has asked for nothing in return and has risked everything to keep me safe. If he is willing to bind himself to me, then I am honored to become his wife." Reverend Hayes smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with approval. "Then I will perform the ceremony. But I want you both to understand that in the eyes of God and this community, this will be a real marriage. You will be committing yourselves to each other for better or worse. Do you both accept that?" "We do," Owen and Rose said in unison. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Pete and Mrs. Hayes served as witnesses, and the Reverend spoke eloquently about the sanctity of marriage and the commitment required to make it work. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Owen leaned in and kissed Rose gently, a brief touch of lips that sent warmth flooding through him. Rose's cheeks flushed pink, and she smiled up at him with genuine happiness that made his heart skip. They signed the marriage certificate and filed it with the county clerk, making it official and legal. As they left the office, Owen noticed two unfamiliar men standing outside the hotel, watching the street with predatory attention. One of them had a sketch in his hand, and Owen felt Rose tense beside him as she recognized them as Henry's hired men. "Stay calm," he murmured, tucking her arm through his. "You are Rose Ellis now, my wife. They have no claim on you." They walked past the men without incident, but Owen felt their eyes following them. It was only a matter of time before someone told them about the marriage, and Owen needed to be prepared for what would come next. Back at the ranch, he spent the afternoon checking his weapons and making sure the house was secure. He sent Pete into town with instructions to keep an eye on the two strangers and report back on their movements. That evening, Owen and Rose sat together in the main room of the house, the fire crackling in the hearth as rain began to patter against the windows. Rose had been quiet since they returned from town, her expression thoughtful and distant. "Are you all right?" Owen asked, setting aside the saddle strap he had been mending. Rose looked up, seeming to come back from wherever her thoughts had taken her. "I am married," she said wonderingly. To a good man who barely knows me but chose to protect me anyway, it feels surreal. We will make it work, Owen assured her. I meant what I said in the church. I know this started as a practical arrangement, but Rose, I want you to know that I genuinely care about you. These past few days have shown me what was missing from my life. I had convinced myself that solitude was what I needed, but having you here has reminded me what it means to share my life with someone. Rose stood and crossed to where he sat, kneeling beside his chair so she could look directly into his eyes. I care about you too, Owen. More than I expected or probably should given the circumstances. You have given me hope when I thought I had none left. You have made me feel safe for the first time in years. I do not know what the future holds, but I want to try to build something real with you if you will have me. Owen cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. I will have you, Rose Ellis, in whatever way you are comfortable with, for as long as you will stay. He kissed her then, not the chaste peck they had shared at their wedding, but a real kiss full of longing and promise. Rose responded eagerly, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders as she poured all her fear and hope and growing affection into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Owen rested his forehead against hers. We should probably take things slowly, he said, though his body was arguing strenuously against that idea. Rose laughed softly. Probably wise, though I have to say, for a marriage of convenience, this is turning out to be surprisingly romantic. They spent the rest of the evening talking and planning, discussing how they would handle Henry's men when they inevitably came calling. Owen explained his property lines and showed Rose the various hiding places he had prepared just in case. But as the night wore on and the conversation turned to more personal matters, Owen found himself falling deeper under her spell. Rose was intelligent and witty, with a sharp sense of humor that emerged when she felt safe enough to let her guard down. She had opinions on everything from politics to literature, and she was not afraid to challenge his assumptions or make him see things from a different perspective. When they finally retired for the evening, Owen walked Rose to her room, which suddenly felt wrong given that they were now married. He paused at her door, uncertain about the etiquette of the situation. You can stay if you want, Rose said quietly, reading his thoughts. I mean, we do not have to do anything, but it might be nice to not sleep alone for once. I have been alone for so long that I had forgotten what it feels like to have someone I can trust nearby. Owen nodded, relief and anticipation flooding through him in equal measure. They prepared for bed in companionable silence, and when they finally lay down together, Rose curled against his side with her head resting on his chest. Owen wrapped his arm around her, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him, how right it felt to hold her close. Thank you, Rose whispered into the darkness, for everything. You do not need to thank me, Owen replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. This is where you belong now. We will face whatever comes together. They drifted off to sleep like that, two wounded souls finding comfort and healing in each other's arms. For the first time in weeks, Rose slept without nightmares, and Owen felt the hollow ache in his chest that had lived there since his sister's death began to ease. The next morning brought Pete riding hard up the drive, his face grim with news. Those two men were asking about you directly at the saloon last night, he reported. Someone must have told them about the wedding because they were not happy. They left town early this morning, and I would bet my saddle they are heading this way. Owen nodded, his jaw set with determination. Then we will be ready for them. Pete, I want you to ride into town and fetch the sheriff. Tell him we have trespassers threatening my property. Even if he does not do anything, I want it on record that we asked for help. Will do, Pete said, wheeling his horse around and galloping back toward town. Owen turned to Rose, who had come out onto the porch at the sound of Pete's arrival. "Go inside and lock the doors," he instructed. "Take the rifle and stay away from the windows. If anything happens to me, you ride out the back way and head for the Hayes place. The Reverend will help you." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Rose said fiercely, though her face had gone pale. "I will not lose you now that I have finally found you." "You are not going to lose me," Owen promised, pulling her close for a quick, hard kiss. "But I need to know you are safe so I can focus on dealing with these men. Please, Rose, trust me." Reluctantly, she went inside, and Owen heard the solid sound of the locks engaging. He checked his revolver and positioned himself on the porch, his rifle leaning against the railing within easy reach. He did not have to wait long. 2 riders appeared on the road leading to his ranch, moving at a steady pace that suggested they were in no hurry. They knew he had nowhere to run. The men dismounted in front of the house, their hands resting casually on their gun belts. They were both in their 30s, hard-faced and dangerous-looking, exactly the kind of men a man like Henry Bartlett would hire for dirty work. "You Owen Ellis?" the taller one asked, his eyes scanning the property with professional assessment. "I am," Owen replied evenly. "And you are trespassing on my land. State your business and then leave." "We are looking for a woman," the second man said. "Rose Owens. We heard she might be here." "There is no Rose Owens here," Owen said truthfully. "My wife's name is Rose Ellis, and she is not going anywhere." The 2 men exchanged glances, and Owen could see them calculating their next move. "We do not want any trouble," the tall one said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We are just here to bring Miss Owens back to her family. Her stepfather is worried sick about her." "Her stepfather is a murderer," Owen said bluntly. "And Rose is no longer his concern. She is a married woman now, legally bound to me. Unless you have a warrant signed by a judge, you have no authority to take her anywhere." "We have our orders," the second man said, his hand moving closer to his gun. "And we will be taking her with us one way or another." "Then you will have to go through me," Owen said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "And I promise you that will not end well for anyone." The standoff stretched out, tension crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. Owen could feel sweat trickling down his back despite the cool October air, but he kept his hands steady and his gaze locked on the 2 men. He was a decent shot and had been in enough tight situations during his younger years to know how to handle himself, but 2 against 1 was never good odds. The sound of hoofbeats broke the tension. Pete came riding up with Sheriff Tom Crawford, a heavy-set man in his 50s who ran Lovelock with a firm but fair hand. The sheriff took in the scene with one experienced glance and dismounted slowly. "What seems to be the problem here?" Sheriff Crawford asked, though his tone suggested he already had a good idea. The tall man turned to the sheriff with an ingratiating smile. "No problem, Sheriff. We are just trying to locate a young woman who ran away from her family. Her stepfather hired us to bring her home safely." "That would be my wife you are talking about," Owen interjected. "And she did not run away. She fled from a man who murdered her mother and threatened her life. These men have no legal authority to take her anywhere." Sheriff Crawford's expression hardened. "That true?" he asked the 2 men. "You have any legal documentation giving you authority to collect this woman?" The 2 men shifted uncomfortably, and Owen knew they had been hoping to intimidate him into handing Rose over without involving the law. "Her stepfather has rights," the tall one argued. "She is his responsibility until she is of age." "She is 24 years old and married," Owen said firmly. "She is well past the age of majority and is now legally under my protection as my wife. These men are trespassing and making threats. I want them removed from my property, Sheriff." Sheriff Crawford nodded slowly. "Show me your marriage certificate." Owen produced the document from his pocket, and the sheriff examined it carefully before handing it back. "Seems legitimate to me," he said, turning to the two hired men. "The lady is married, which means she has made her choice. Unless you can produce a warrant or some other legal document, you have no business here. I suggest you head back to wherever you came from and tell your employer that Mrs. Ellis is staying put." "You do not know who you are dealing with," the second man said angrily. "Henry Bartlett does not take kindly to people interfering in his business. And I do not take kindly to hired thugs threatening citizens in my town," Sheriff Crawford replied, his hand resting on his own weapon. "You have two choices. You can leave peacefully right now, or I can arrest you for trespassing and threatening behavior. What will it be?" The two men glared at Owen with undisguised hostility, but they knew they were beaten, at least for now. They mounted their horses and turned back toward the road, but the tall one called back over his shoulder, "This is not over. Mr. Bartlett will hear about this, and he will not be pleased." "I am shaking with fear," Owen replied dryly, though he knew the threat was real. After the men disappeared down the road, Sheriff Crawford turned to Owen with a serious expression. "You want to tell me what that was really about?" Owen explained the situation as thoroughly as he could, detailing Rose's flight from Carson City and Henry Bartlett's role in her mother's death. The sheriff listened without interrupting, his face growing grimmer as the story unfolded. "That is a serious accusation," he said when Owen finished. "But if it is true, and I am inclined to believe you, then you have just made a powerful enemy. Henry Bartlett has connections that reach far beyond Carson City. If he decides to make trouble for you, it could get ugly." "I know," Owen said quietly, "but I could not turn her away, Sheriff." "Would you have?" Sheriff Crawford sighed and shook his head. "No, I suppose I would not have." "Just be careful, Owen. Keep your eyes open and do not take any chances. If those men come back or if you see anyone else suspicious around your property, you send for me immediately." "Understand." "I understand. Thank you for coming, Sheriff." After Crawford and Pete left, Owen went inside to find Rose standing in the hallway, the rifle still clutched in her hands. Her face was tear-streaked but determined, and when she saw him, she set the weapon aside and threw herself into his arms. "I heard everything," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "You could have been killed because of me." "But I was not," Owen said firmly, holding her tight, "and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Rose, you need to understand something. When I married you, I made a commitment. Not just a legal one, but a personal one. I meant those vows, every word. You are my wife now, and I will protect you with everything I have." Rose pulled back to look up at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "I never thought I would find someone like you. Someone who would stand up for me without expecting anything in return. I am falling in love with you, Owen Ellis. I know it is fast and probably crazy given everything that is happening, but it is the truth." Owen felt his heart swell with an emotion so powerful it nearly took his breath away. "I am falling in love with you too," he admitted. "Maybe I have been since the moment I found you in my hayloft, scared but determined to survive. You have brought something back into my life that I thought I had lost forever. Hope, purpose, joy. I do not care how fast it is happening. I know what I feel, and I am not going to apologize for it." He kissed her then, pouring all his emotion into the contact, and Rose responded with equal fervor. They stood there in the hallway, holding each other and kissing as if they could ward off all the danger and uncertainty with the strength of their growing love. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and flushed with desire. "We should probably talk about what happens next," Rose said, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "What happens next is we live our lives," Owen said simply. We work the ranch, we build a home together, and we face whatever challenges come our way as a team. Henry Bartlett may try to cause more trouble, but eventually he will realize that you are beyond his reach, and he will move on to other concerns. Men like that do not waste resources on lost causes. I hope you are right, Rose said, though doubt lingered in her voice. Over the following weeks, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Rose proved to be an excellent partner, taking over the household management and even helping with some of the ranch work when Owen needed an extra hand. She learned to ride better, practiced shooting until she could hit a target with reasonable accuracy, and generally made herself indispensable to the running of the property. But it was the quiet moments that Owen treasured most. The evenings spent talking on the porch as the sun set. The mornings waking up with Rose curled against him, her hair spread across his chest. The stolen kisses in the barn when Pete was not looking. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes and challenged his opinions and made him think about the world in new ways. They were careful about going into town together, not wanting to draw attention or make Rose an easy target if Henry sent more men after her. But slowly, the people of Lovelock came to accept her as Owen's wife, and she began to build friendships with the other women in the community. Mrs. Hayes took her under her wing, teaching her the local customs and introducing her to the church ladies. The general store owner's wife, Martha, became a close friend, often stopping by the ranch for afternoon tea and conversation. As November turned to December, and the first snows began to fall on the mountains surrounding Lovelock, Owen started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had outrun the danger. There had been no more visits from Henry's men, no threatening letters or suspicious strangers asking questions. It seemed that Sheriff Crawford's intervention and the legal barrier of their marriage had been enough to convince Henry Bartlett that Rose was no longer worth pursuing. Then, on a cold morning in mid-December, Pete came riding in with news that changed everything. "Owen, you need to see this," he said, handing over a newspaper from Reno. The headline screamed the story in bold type: "Mining magnate Henry Bartlett arrested for murder." Owen read the article with growing amazement. According to the report, an investigation into Henry Bartlett's business practices had uncovered evidence of multiple crimes, including fraud, bribery, and the murder of his wife. A former business associate, seeking to reduce his own sentence, had provided testimony and evidence that corroborated Rose's account of what happened. Henry was in custody awaiting trial, and his extensive network of corrupt officials was being dismantled piece by piece. "It is over," Owen said wonderingly, looking up at Rose, who had come to read over his shoulder. "He cannot hurt you any more." Rose's hand trembled as she took the newspaper, reading the article again as if to convince herself it was real. "I cannot believe it," she whispered. "All this time I thought he was untouchable, that his money and power would always protect him, but justice actually prevailed." She started to cry then, not tears of sadness but of overwhelming relief and release. Owen pulled her close, letting her sob out all the fear and stress and trauma she had been carrying for months. Pete tactfully excused himself to check on the horses, giving them privacy for this emotional moment. "You are truly free now," Owen murmured into her hair. "No more looking over your shoulder, no more fear. You can build whatever life you want." Rose pulled back, wiping her eyes and looking at him with an expression that made his breath catch. "I already have the life I want," she said firmly, "right here with you. Owen, when we got married, I thought it was just a temporary solution to keep me safe. But somewhere along the way, this became real for me. You became the most important person in my world. I do not want an annulment or a divorce. I want to stay married to you to build a real life together." If you will have me. Owen laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief. If I will have you. Rose, I have been terrified that once you were safe, you would realize you did not need me anymore and would leave. I have been trying not to fall deeper in love with you, because I thought I would only be setting myself up for heartbreak. But the truth is, I am already so far gone that it does not matter. I love you completely and absolutely. I want you to stay, not because you need protection, but because you want to be here. Because you love me too. I do love you, Rose said, standing on her toes to kiss him softly. I love your kindness and your strength. I love the way you see the best in people. I love how you make me feel safe and cherished. I love the life we are building together. I do not want to be anywhere else. They held each other for a long time. Two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances, and had somehow managed to build something beautiful out of that darkness. The weight that had been pressing on both of them for months finally lifted, leaving them free to truly embrace their future together. Christmas that year was a celebration unlike any Owen had experienced in years. Rose decorated the house with pine boughs and candles, filling the rooms with warmth and light. They attended the Christmas service at church, where Reverend Hayes welcomed Rose publicly as a valued member of the community. The townsfolk brought gifts and well wishes, fully accepting her as Owen's wife and one of their own. On Christmas Eve, as they sat together by the fire, Owen presented Rose with a gift he had been working on in secret for weeks. It was a wooden jewelry box he had carved himself, inlaid with a design of wild roses that reminded him of her strength and beauty. "It is beautiful," Rose breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Owen, you made this." "I wanted you to have something special," he said, feeling suddenly shy. "Something that showed how much you mean to me." Rose opened the box to find a delicate gold necklace nestled inside, a simple pendant in the shape of a heart. "I know it is not much," Owen added quickly. "But I wanted to give you something that represented my heart, which belongs completely to you now." Rose's eyes filled with tears as she lifted the necklace from the box. "It is perfect," she said. "Will you put it on for me?" Owen fastened the necklace around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin. When he finished, Rose turned to face him, her hands coming up to frame his face. "I have a gift for you too," she said softly. "Though it is not something I can wrap or put under the tree. Owen, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." Owen felt the world stop for a moment as the words sank in. A baby. Their baby. A child created from their love and commitment to each other. Joy unlike anything he had ever experienced flooded through him, and he pulled Rose into his arms, laughing and kissing her face all over. "A baby," he repeated wonderingly. "Rose, that is the most incredible gift you could have given me. When did you find out?" "I suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be sure before I told you," Rose explained, her face glowing with happiness. "Martha helped me confirm it yesterday when she came by. I am about 2 months along, which means the baby should arrive in late June or early July." Owen placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach, marveling at the life growing inside her. "I am going to be a father," he said, the reality of it hitting him fully. "We are going to be parents. Rose, I promise you, I will be the best father I can be. Our child will grow up surrounded by love and safety, knowing they are wanted and cherished." "I know," Rose said, covering his hand with hers. "That is why I am not afraid. With you beside me, I know everything will be all right." They spent the rest of the evening making plans and dreaming about their future. Owen was already mentally preparing to add on to the house to make room for the nursery. Rose talked about teaching their child to read and ride and appreciate the beauty of the Nevada landscape. They argued playfully about names and debated whether they wanted a boy or a girl, though both agreed that as long as the baby was healthy, nothing else mattered. As winter gave way to spring, Rose's pregnancy became more obvious, and Owen became increasingly protective, much to her amusement. He insisted she not lift anything heavy, worried constantly about her health, and drove Pete crazy with his distracted attention to ranch work. But Rose took it all in stride, recognizing that Owen's protectiveness came from a place of deep love and the memory of losing his sister. In March, they received word that Henry Bartlett had been convicted of murder and sentenced to hang. Rose felt a complex mix of emotions at the news, relief that justice had been served mixed with sadness for what could have been if her mother had married a different man. Owen held her through the difficult emotions, understanding that closure was rarely simple or clean. As Rose's due date approached, Owen made sure everything was prepared. He had expanded the house to include a proper nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow, and building a cradle from solid oak. Martha and Mrs. Hayes had organized the church ladies to provide baby clothes, blankets, and all the necessities a new mother would need. Dr. Martin, who traveled between Lovelock and the surrounding ranches providing medical care, agreed to be on call for when Rose went into labor. On a warm evening in early July, Rose felt the first contractions. Owen immediately sent Pete racing for the doctor while he helped Rose into bed and tried not to panic. Labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Owen wondered if his heart would simply stop from fear and helplessness. But Rose was strong, enduring the pain with remarkable courage, gripping his hand so hard he lost feeling in his fingers. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, their son was born. The baby's lusty cry filled the house, and Owen felt tears streaming down his face as Dr. Martin placed the tiny, perfect infant in Rose's arms. "A boy," Rose said wonderingly, counting his fingers and toes with careful reverence. "Owen, we have a son." Owen leaned over to kiss his wife's sweaty forehead and gently touch his son's downy head. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed many names over the months, but looking at their son's small, serious face, Rose knew immediately. "Thomas," she said, "after Reverend Hayes, who married us and gave us a chance at this life. Thomas Ellis." "Thomas Ellis," Owen repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Tommy." The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the overwhelming love that came with parenthood. Owen discovered reserves of patience and gentleness he had not known he possessed, walking the floor at 3 in the morning with Tommy cradled against his chest, singing off key lullabies until the baby fell back asleep. Rose bloomed into motherhood, managing the demands of caring for an infant with the same grace and determination she brought to everything else in her life. As Tommy grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, smiling baby, the ranch prospered. Owen's careful management and hard work paid off, and he was able to expand his herd and hire additional help. Pete, who had become like family to both Owen and Rose, took on more responsibility and became Tommy's honorary grandfather, spoiling the boy shamelessly. When Tommy was a year old, they held a party to celebrate, inviting the entire community to the ranch for food, music, and dancing. As Owen watched Rose laughing with Martha while Tommy toddled between them on unsteady legs, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought them together. What had started as a desperate plea for just one more night had transformed into a lifetime of love and partnership. That evening, after all the guests had left and Tommy was asleep in his cradle, Owen and Rose stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Rose leaned against Owen's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her waist. "You ever think about that night in the hayloft?" Rose asked quietly. "When you found me scared and desperate, asking for just one more night?" "All the time," Owen admitted. "I think about how close I came to turning you away, to playing it safe and avoiding complications. I think about how different my life would be right now if I had made that choice." "And," Rose prompted, tilting her head back to look up at him. "And I thank God every day that I did not," Owen said seriously. "You and Tommy are the best things that ever happened to me. You gave me a reason to be more than just a rancher living a solitary life. You gave me love and purpose and a future worth building. I would go through all the danger and fear again in a heartbeat if it meant ending up right here with you." Rose turned in his arms, reaching up to pull his head down for a deep, passionate kiss. "I love you, Owen Ellis," she murmured against his lips. "Thank you for giving me more than just one more night. Thank you for giving me forever." "Forever," Owen agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. 2 years later, Rose gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret, after Owen's beloved sister. The little girl had Rose's dark hair and Owen's blue eyes, and she was doted on by her big brother who took his protective duties very seriously. Tommy would sit beside the cradle for hours, showing Margaret his toys and telling her stories, even though she was too young to understand. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Owen's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle spread, and he was able to provide a comfortable life for his growing family. They added more rooms to the house, expanded the barns, and even built a small schoolhouse on the property so their children and those of neighboring families could receive a proper education. As the children grew, Owen and Rose made sure to teach them not just practical skills, but also the values that had brought their parents together. Kindness, courage, standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. They told Tommy and Margaret the story of how they had met, appropriately edited for young ears, emphasizing the importance of helping those in need and never turning away from someone who was suffering. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen took Rose back to the hayloft where they had first met. He had cleaned it out and filled it with lanterns, creating a soft glow that reminded them both of that fateful night. They climbed up together, and Rose laughed when she saw he had even spread fresh hay in one corner. "Are you trying to recreate our first meeting?" she teased, linking her arms around his neck. "I am trying to remind us both of how far we have come," Owen said, pulling her close. 10 years ago, you asked me for just one more night. I could not have imagined then that one night would turn into a lifetime of nights, each one better than the last. You gave me so much more than shelter that night," Rose said softly. "You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me safety when I was terrified. You gave me love when I thought I would never trust anyone again. Owen Ellis, you saved my life in every way that matters." "And you saved mine," Owen replied. "I was slowly turning into a bitter, lonely man before you came along. You reminded me what it meant to care about someone beyond myself. You gave me a family and a purpose, and more happiness than I ever thought possible. These 10 years with you have been the best of my life." They made love there in the hayloft, their passion as strong as it had been in the early days of their marriage, but tempered now with the deep knowledge and trust that came from years of partnership. Afterwards, they lay together in the hay, Rose's head on Owen's shoulder, both of them looking up at the stars visible through the gaps in the roof. "You think Tommy and Margaret will understand someday?" Rose asked. "How precious and fragile love can be, how it is worth fighting for." "I think they will," Owen said confidently. We are teaching them by example every day. They see how we treat each other with respect and affection. They see how we work together to solve problems. They see that real love is not just passion and romance, though we have plenty of that. It is also commitment and partnership and choosing each other every single day. Rose smiled and pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "I choose you," she said simply, "today and always." "And I choose you," Owen replied, "forever and always." As the years continued to pass, their love only deepened. They faced challenges together, from droughts that threatened the ranch to illnesses that scared them both, but they never faced anything alone. They were partners in every sense of the word, building a life and a legacy that would extend far beyond their own years. Tommy grew into a strong, responsible young man who shared his father's love of the land and his mother's compassionate heart. He took over more of the ranch operations as Owen got older, allowing his parents to enjoy a slightly slower pace of life. Margaret became a teacher, opening a school in Lovelock that served children from all the surrounding ranches, and teaching them with the same passion for learning her mother had instilled in her. When Owen and Rose celebrated their 25th anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the community they had helped build, Owen reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. Everything had started with one desperate woman asking for one more night, and it had blossomed into a love story that had shaped not just their lives but the lives of everyone around them. "What are you thinking about?" Rose asked, sliding her hand into his as they watched their family celebrate around them. "I am thinking about the words you said to me that first night," Owen replied. "Just one more night, and how sometimes one moment of courage and compassion can change everything." Rose squeezed his hand, her eyes still as bright and beautiful as they had been the day they married. "Best decision I ever made," she said. "Choosing your hayloft to hide in." "Best decision I ever made was helping you," Owen countered. "Well, that and convincing you to marry me." "You did not have to work too hard on that one," Rose teased. "I was pretty much in love with you from the moment you offered me a safe place to stay without asking for anything in return." Their daughter Margaret approached with her young son, asking if Grandma and Grandpa wanted to hold the baby. Rose took her grandson eagerly, cooing at him while Owen wrapped his arm around her shoulders, the three generations connected by love and family. As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, Owen looked around at everything they had built together and felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. The ranch that had once been just a lonely outpost had become a thriving homestead filled with love, laughter, and life. Rose had asked for one more night, but fate and love had given them so much more. They had been given a lifetime together, filled with challenges overcome, joy shared, and love that grew stronger with each passing year. Their story had become part of the fabric of Lovelock, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and the transformative nature of true love. As they prepared for bed that night, moving through the comfortable routines of a long marriage, Owen pulled Rose close and whispered, "Thank you for asking for just one more night. Thank you for staying for a lifetime." Rose smiled up at him, her hand coming up to cup his weathered cheek. "Thank you for saying yes," she replied. "Thank you for seeing past the scared girl in your hayloft and giving me the chance to become the woman I was meant to be. Thank you for loving me so completely that I never doubted I was exactly where I belonged." They kissed then, a gentle touch of lips that spoke of decades of love and intimacy, and climbed into the bed they had shared for 25 years. As sleep claimed them, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been every night since they married, Both of them knew with absolute certainty that they had found what so many people spent their entire lives searching for. They had found home in each other, and that home had become the foundation for a love that would endure through all the seasons of their lives. From that first desperate night in the hayloft to this moment of peaceful contentment, their journey had been filled with challenges and triumphs, fear and joy, struggle and success. But through it all, they had faced everything together, their love the constant that guided them through whatever life brought their way. The ranch continued to prosper under Tommy's capable management, and Owen spent his later years teaching his grandchildren all the skills and wisdom he had accumulated over a lifetime. He showed them how to gentle a horse with patience rather than force, how to read the weather in the clouds gathering over the mountains, how to mend a fence that would hold through any storm. But more importantly, he taught them about integrity, about treating everyone with respect regardless of their station, about the importance of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. Rose, too, found joy in passing on her knowledge to the younger generation. She taught her granddaughters to read and write, shared her love of books and learning, and told them stories of courage and perseverance that inspired them to pursue their own dreams. She never hid the difficult parts of her past, using her own experiences to teach important lessons about resilience and the power of choosing hope over despair. On quiet evenings, when the grandchildren had gone home and the ranch was peaceful, Owen and Rose would still sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the land they loved. Sometimes they talked, sharing memories and making plans. Other times they simply sat in comfortable silence, their hands linked, their presence a comfort and a promise to each other. "You have any regrets?" Rose asked one evening when they were both in their 60s, their hair gray and their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. Owen thought about the question carefully before answering. "Not about us," he said finally. "Not about a single moment we have shared. I regret that I could not save my sister Margaret, but finding you and building this life together has helped heal that old wound. Everything we have done together, and I would not change any of it." "Neither would I," Rose agreed. "Even the hard parts, the scary parts, the times when we did not know if we would make it through. All of it led us here, to this life we have built, and I am grateful for every single day." They grew old together with grace and dignity, facing the inevitable decline of aging as they had faced everything else in their marriage, with courage, humor, and unwavering support for each other. When Owen's joints began to ache with arthritis, and he could no longer work the ranch as he once had, Rose was there to rub salve into his aching hands and remind him of all he had accomplished. When Rose's eyesight began to fail and she could no longer read the books she loved, Owen read to her every evening, his voice bringing the stories to life. On the morning of their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. Children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren filled the house and yard with noise and laughter. Reverend Hayes, now elderly himself, came to renew their vows in a ceremony that had everyone wiping away tears. 50 years ago, I married two people who were taking a leap of faith," Reverend Hayes said, his voice still strong despite his age. "They barely knew each other, but they trusted in the power of love and commitment to see them through. Now, looking at this family they have built, this community they have strengthened, this legacy of love they have created, I can say without hesitation that theirs is one of the greatest love stories I have ever had the privilege to witness." Owen and Rose stood hand in hand, renewing the vows they had made so long ago with even deeper meaning and commitment. When Reverend Hayes pronounced them still husband and wife after 50 years of marriage, their children cheered and their grandchildren clapped, and Owen pulled Rose close for a kiss that proved their passion had not dimmed with age. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing. Owen, despite his aching joints, insisted on dancing with Rose under the stars, holding her close as they swayed to a fiddle playing a slow, romantic tune. Looking into her eyes, still bright with love and life despite the years, Owen felt his heart swell with emotion. 50 years, he murmured, and it still does not feel like enough time with you. Then we will just have to make the most of whatever time we have left, Rose replied, resting her head against his chest where she could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady. Every day is a gift, Owen. Every moment together is precious. They danced until Rose grew tired, then sat together surrounded by their family, accepting congratulations and well wishes from the community that had embraced them so long ago. As the party began to wind down and people started heading home, Tommy approached his parents with a gift. "Margaret and I wanted to give you something special for your anniversary," he said, handing them a leather-bound book. "We collected stories and memories from everyone in the family and in town, all the ways you two have touched lives over the years. We thought you might like to have them all in one place." Rose opened the book with trembling hands, her eyes immediately filling with tears as she read the first entry, written by Martha. It was the story of how Rose had helped her through a difficult time after her husband died, sitting with her through the long nights when grief was overwhelming, never judging or offering empty platitudes, just being present and supportive. They spent the next hour reading through the book together, discovering how many lives they had impacted without even realizing it. Former students Rose had taught writing about how she had inspired them to pursue education. Ranchers Owen had helped during hard times, expressing gratitude for his generosity and advice. Neighbors recounting acts of kindness, both large and small. Even the current sheriff had contributed a story about how Owen's integrity and fairness had shaped his own approach to law enforcement. "I had no idea," Rose whispered, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I never realized we had done so much." "You lived your values," Margaret said softly, kneeling beside her mother's chair. "You and Father taught all of us, not just through words but through actions, what it means to be good people. You showed us how to love unconditionally, how to help those in need, how to build something lasting and meaningful. That is your real legacy, not just the ranch or the family, but the way you have shaped this entire community for the better." As the night finally drew to a close and they were alone again, Owen and Rose sat together in the main room of the house they had shared for 50 years. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls covered with photographs documenting their life together. From their wedding day to the births of their children and grandchildren, every important moment was captured and preserved. "We did all right, did we not?" Owen said, looking around at the evidence of their life together. "We did more than all right," Rose replied firmly. "We built something beautiful, Owen. A life filled with love and purpose. We raised good children who are raising good children of their own. We helped build a community where people look after each other. We loved each other through everything life threw at us. I would say we did magnificently." Owen pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "None of it would have been possible without you," he said seriously. "You are my heart, Rose. You always have been." "And you are mine," Rose replied, reaching up to touch his face gently. "My protector, my partner, my greatest love. Thank you for 50 years of happiness." They sat together in the firelight until they both dozed off, comfortable and content in each other's presence. When they finally made their way to bed, Moving slowly with the stiffness of age, they still slept wrapped in each other's arms as they had for 50 years, finding comfort and security in physical closeness. The years that followed were quieter but no less rich. Owen and Rose watched with pride as their grandchildren grew and began families of their own. They offered advice when asked, but mostly just enjoyed being present for all the small moments that made life meaningful. Sunday dinners with the whole family became a cherished tradition, the house once again filled with noise and laughter and love. When Owen was 78, he became ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Rose never left his side, staying with him through the fever and delirium, talking to him even when he could not respond, reminding him of all the reasons he needed to keep fighting. Tommy and Margaret took turns sitting vigil as well, but it was Rose's voice that Owen responded to, Rose's hand he gripped when the worst of the illness had him in its clutches. "You have to come back to me," Rose whispered during the darkest hours of the night when she was alone with him. "We have more living to do together, Owen Ellis. I am not ready to let you go." And whether it was sheer determination, excellent care from Dr. Martin's son who had taken over his father's practice, or simply not being ready to leave Rose behind, Owen recovered. It took weeks before he was fully back on his feet, but he fought his way back to health with the same stubbornness he brought to everything in life. "You are not getting rid of me that easily," he told Rose when he was finally strong enough to sit up and take nourishment on his own. "I promised you forever, and I intend to keep that promise." Rose laughed through her tears of relief, holding his hand tight. "Good," she said fiercely, "because I am holding you to that promise, old man." 3 more years they had together, 3 years of cherishing every moment and taking nothing for granted. They celebrated Tommy's marriage to a sweet girl from Reno and welcomed more great-grandchildren into the family. They watched Margaret open a second school in a neighboring town. They saw the ranch continue to prosper under Tommy's management and knew their legacy was secure. On a warm spring evening, much like the one when they had renewed their vows, Owen and Rose sat together on the porch watching the sunset. It had become their favorite time of day, this quiet hour when the world seemed to slow down and it was just the two of them and the land they loved. "I have been thinking," Owen said, his arm around Rose's shoulders as she leaned against him, "about that first night when I found you in the hayloft." "What about it?" Rose asked, though she smiled because she knew this was one of Owen's favorite topics of conversation in recent years. "I have been thinking about how one decision, one moment of choosing compassion over caution, changed the entire trajectory of my life," Owen explained. "If I had turned you away that night, I would have missed out on everything that matters most to me. Our marriage, our children, this beautiful life we built together. All of it came from saying yes when I could have said no." Rose tilted her head up to look at him, her eyes still bright and beautiful despite her age. "And I have been thinking about how asking for help, trusting a stranger when I had every reason to trust no one, was the bravest thing I ever did. That moment of courage led me to you, and you led me to this life. We saved each other, Owen. That is what real love does." They sat in companionable silence for a while longer, watching as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors before disappearing behind the mountains. The air was sweet with the scent of spring flowers, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear cattle lowing as they settled for the night. "No regrets?" Owen asked, as he had so many times over the years. "Not a single one," Rose replied, as she always did. "Every moment with you has been a gift. Even the hard times, even the scary times, all of it was worth it because we faced it together." "Just one more night," Owen said softly, repeating the words that had started everything. "That is all you asked for. "And you gave me 53 years of nights," Rose replied, squeezing his hand. 53 years of falling asleep beside you and waking up in your arms. 53 years of building a life and a love that exceeded my wildest dreams. You gave me everything, Owen Ellis. "You gave me everything too," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. "You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to be the best man I could be. You gave me a family and a home and more love than I ever thought possible. I am the luckiest man alive, Rose." As full darkness fell, and the first stars began to appear in the clear Nevada sky, they finally went inside to prepare for bed. Their movements were slow and careful now, bodies worn by 8 decades of life, but they still moved together with the unconscious synchronization of a couple who had spent most of their adult lives as one unit. That night, as they lay together in the bed they had shared for so many years, Rose suddenly spoke into the darkness. "Owen, yes, my love, promise me something, anything. Promise me that when my time comes, you will remember all the good times. Promise me you will not spend whatever time you have left drowning in grief, but celebrating the life we built together. Promise me you will still smile when you think of me." Owen felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I promise," he managed. "But you are going to outlive me by years, you stubborn woman. I am the one who should be asking for promises." Rose chuckled softly. "Then I promise too. Whoever goes first, the other will remember the love, not just the loss. We will honor what we built together by continuing to live fully until we can be reunited." "Deal," Owen agreed, pulling her closer. "I love you, Rose Ellis. Today, tomorrow, and beyond forever." "I love you too, Owen Ellis. Always and eternal." They drifted off to sleep like that, holding each other close, neither of them knowing that this would be one of their last nights together. 3 weeks later, Rose suffered a massive stroke while working in her garden. She died peacefully in her sleep that night, with Owen holding her hand and whispering words of love until her last breath. The funeral was attended by nearly everyone in Lovelock and the surrounding areas, a testament to the impact Rose had made over her 53 years in Nevada. Owen stood strong through it all, fulfilling his promise to honor her memory with grace rather than succumbing to grief. He spoke at the service about the incredible woman she had been, how she had transformed from a frightened fugitive into the heart of their family and community. He told the story of their first meeting, making people laugh through their tears as he described finding her in his hayloft, and how she had whispered, "Just one more night," never knowing that one night would become a lifetime. After the service, as people came to offer condolences, Owen accepted them with dignity but also with stories of joy. He shared funny memories of Rose, celebrated her accomplishments, and made sure everyone remembered her as the vibrant, loving woman she had been, not just as someone they had lost. True to his promise, Owen continued living fully in the months that followed. He spent time with his children and grandchildren, passing on more stories and wisdom. He worked on the ranch as much as his body would allow, finding comfort in the familiar routines and the land he had shared with Rose. On warm evenings, he still sat on the porch watching the sunset, and though his eyes might be damp with tears, his face also carried a smile as he remembered 53 years of love and companionship. 6 months after Rose's death, on a crisp October morning much like the one when they had first met, Owen's children found him in his bed, a peaceful expression on his face. On the nightstand beside him was the wooden jewelry box he had made for Rose all those years ago, open to reveal the gold heart necklace she had worn every day of their marriage. In his hand was a letter he had written, addressed to his family. In the letter, Owen told them not to mourn but to celebrate. He wrote about the incredible gift Rose had been in his life, how she had saved him from loneliness and given him a reason to be his best self. He thanked his children for the joy they had brought him and urged them to continue the legacy of love and compassion that he and Rose had tried to model. He expressed his certainty that he was going to be reunited with his beloved wife and that their love story would continue in whatever came next. The family buried Owen beside Rose in the cemetery overlooking the ranch they had built together. The double headstone read, Owen Ellis and Rose Ellis. He offered her shelter. She gave him love. Together they built a legacy that will endure forever. Just one more night became a lifetime of nights, and their love story continues beyond the stars. At the funeral, Tommy stood to speak about his parents, his voice strong despite his grief. My father found my mother sleeping in his hayloft one night in October 1881. She was running from danger and asked for just one more night of shelter. He gave her that and so much more. Their love story became the foundation for all of our lives, the example we all try to follow. They taught us that real love is choosing each other every single day, through good times and bad. They showed us that compassion and courage can change the world, one life at a time. And they proved that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust in love, even when everything else seems uncertain. The ranch continued to thrive under Tommy's management, passed down through generations of the Ellis family. The story of Owen and Rose became part of local legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of how love could flourish even in the hardest circumstances. Their names were honored throughout Lovelock, with the school Rose had founded bearing her name, and a community center built on land Owen had donated named in his honor. But their greatest legacy was not in buildings or land, or even the thriving ranch that bore their name. It was in the lives they had touched, the values they had instilled in their children and grandchildren, and the love story that inspired everyone who heard it. From that first desperate plea for just one more night had grown a love that transcended time and death, a love that continued to impact their family and community long after they were gone. And on warm October evenings, when the sunset painted the Nevada sky in brilliant colors, some people swore they could still see two figures sitting together on the porch of the old Ellis Ranch, holding hands and watching the mountains, their love eternal and their story never ending.